Hi, Jonathan York, Bay Financial Partners, looking at investment markets. COVID continues to dominate the sort of investment markets really, as the sort of Delta strain now is becoming the sort of dominant force and is showing a little bit of a resurgence. Now this is despite vaccinations, which again are going pretty well, certainly in the US and the UK, but still Delta is still out there. And we are seeing cases rise as the economies are gradually reopening. But what is interesting is that hospitalizations are sort of falling, and certainly the rate of transmission is still pretty high, but the actual severity of the illness now with the vaccinations is much less severe. So you've now got an interesting situation in the US where you've got a little bit of sort of falling growth now, and that's starting to sort of peter out a little bit after the initial sort of surge with the mass reopening. Many states are now sort of going back to reinstigating some of the sort of restrictions, and that's really been showing up in the latest jobs data as well. Looking for around sort of 700,000 jobs to be created, and then it came in at 235,000. So much weaker than anticipated. But interestingly, you've got about 10.5 million job vacancies out there, but you just don't have enough people to fill those vacancies, as people are sort of a little bit reluctant to sort of go back, given the resurgence of this Delta variant. And that's obviously having a knock-on effect then with growth, because if less people are out there sort of working, you're not getting the sort of flow through the economic system, and it really is posing a few problems out there. And when you get that added to the supply chain issues as well, with sort of shipping and sort of shipping containers, etc., that are being sort of stockpiled around the world in various sort of ports because they just can't get moved, that's really creating a few issues. What's really quite interesting now in the US is sort of the Fed speak coming out surrounding this. A lot of talk now about the Fed is still looking to be as sort of helpful as possible. The potential of sort of starting to sort of reduce that sort of aid, the sort of taper. That's really being sort of pushed back, and it's just going to be very interesting now to see when you start to see the first sort of rate increase, because potentially that's been pushed back now until sort of mid-2022 in the US. Then as well, obviously in the US, you've got back to school as well, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with cases as you see the mass reopening of schools and education facilities across the US. But on the plus side, you've still got very strong corporate earnings in the US, and it's just going to be interesting to see on the next round, how those earnings sort of hold up, because at present, last time there was sort of around 80% of the companies that reported were better than expected on their earnings. In the US, as if COVID wasn't enough, you obviously had the sort of big storms and flooding down in New Orleans, and also further up the East Coast in New York as well. Now on the back of this sort of speed bump and a few little sort of wobbles in terms of growth, oil has sort of come back well below sort of $70 now. UK, interesting situation with Prime Minister Johnson. You've seen the Conservative Party actually talk about increasing taxes, and they've just looked at raising the national insurance contributions out there. That's a tax hike coming from the Conservative Party, which really is pretty much unheard of. But that's obviously helped, sort of put some contribution towards the sort of COVID costs. But on the whole, the UK economy again is sort of pushing on at a pretty good rate. Likewise in Europe as well, they seem to have sort of managed to negotiate through the sort of summer months with COVID, and it's now just going to be very interesting to see what happens in the Northern Hemisphere as sort of the winter months sets in, and see what happens with COVID. Will they be sort of forced to get a booster vaccination, which many countries are looking at now? Closer to home in Australia, still struggling very much with COVID, especially in New South Wales. They've got cases now ranging from around sort of 1,200 to sort of 1,500 new cases a day, and that's yet to peak yet. They sort of tend to feel that in the next sort of week or so, those cases will peak at maybe just over 2,000 new cases a day. So New South Wales in lockdown, Victoria in lockdown. The rest of the states aren't doing too badly. The cases are still sort of very low out there. But what is helping as well is the sort of mass vaccination program in Australia. And interesting as well, Australia has now come out and sort of said that elimination of COVID is not a viable option, and they're going for the sort of mass vaccination. Once they get around 80% of the population vaccinated, they're then looking at relaxing the restrictions. They're even talking about reopening the border. And obviously, if that is the case, that would be a big boost to the Australian economy. But they just need to get those vaccinations up. Here in New Zealand, after the snap lockdown, the whole country was sort of forced into a level 4 lockdown with sort of no movement and just sort of staying at home really, just going out for a little bit of light exercise. That's now changed down to level 2 now for everyone apart from Auckland. Auckland's still in level 4. That'll be reviewed on Monday. And potentially cases are starting to fall now from around sort of 50, 60 cases a day down to sort of 20, 20, 21 and then 15. Although there have been a few slip-ups, one major one was at a hospital, so it's just going to be interesting to see what comes out of that. Because again, with the supply chain issues, a lot of sort of stock and stuff comes through Auckland, and that really needs to be sort of distributed to the rest of the country. And interestingly, the New Zealand government has come out and still talking about elimination of COVID, while most other countries are sort of saying that that is not really a viable option. Interesting here on the vaccine rollout, we only got about 30% of the population fully vaccinated. Really those numbers need to be up above 80% really to have any sort of meaningful effect on stopping the spread of the virus. But certainly with the rest of the country, apart from Auckland coming out of a strict lockdown down to level 2, that is giving a little bit of a boost to the economy. But obviously hospitality is still sort of struggling, especially with the new sort of restrictions. You can only have a maximum of 50 people inside, mandatory mask wearing in sort of public places, shopping malls, etc. And again, what it has done is sort of pushed back the potential rate increase that was really pretty much a shoe-in before this COVID outbreak in August. That's now been pushed back, and potentially you might not even see a rate increase in New Zealand now in 2021. Whereas just sort of 4 to 5 weeks ago, potentially you're looking at an OCR of sort of being up around 1% from its current level of 0.25 by the year end. So obviously with this low interest rate environment, it is pretty tough out there for investors looking for income. But if you are interested in discussing what's available, go to the website www.bayfinancialpartners.co.nz for lots of interesting articles, and we look forward to speaking to you soon.